What the Heart Desires, posted by J. Rubus. The devil strode down the middle of US Route 15, a spring in his step and a tune on his lips. Around him, the night-drenched forest stood silent in the light of the cold autumn moon, the bugs and bullfrogs and night things going quiet in his presence. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled, followed by another, and then another, until the crisp air was filled with their eerie song, the children of the night. He thought with a sly grin, what music they make. Route 15 runs through the wilderness for 20 miles between Grafton Falls and Berkeley. A few ramshackle houses pressed close to the road here and there. As the devil passed, sleepers stirred in their beds, slick night terrors passing close to their minds. In one house, a crucifix fell from a wall. In another, a mirror shattered. A dog whined and scurried into the darkness underneath a porch, and a cat fell dead of a heart attack. The devil smiled at these things. The night was his to do with as he pleased, and it positively brimmed with possibilities. Perhaps he would derail a train and listen to the heavenly sounds of twisting metal, breaking bodies, and rushing steam. Or maybe he would wave his hand and cause the Kanawha River dam to fail, the roar of water splashing downstream in a deadly tide, sweeping away everything in its path. Buildings, bridges, babies in their cribs rang in his head, and giddy excitement flowed through him. The night offered so much, but even he, as great and grand as he was, could only do one thing at a time. The road bent around a wooden hillside, and somewhere in its growth, a homeless camp huddled around a feeble fire. One man muttered in his sleep, a weak noise of distress, and a woman's period started, spilling down her legs in a sticky red torrent. Yes, the night belonged to him, and he intended to make the most of it. Somehow. 15 miles away, a young girl sat on a window ledge with her knees drawn to her chest and watched the face of the cloud-wrapped moon below her. The town of Grafton Falls slept, frozen save for the single blinking caution light on Main Street several blocks over. 3 miles east, beyond a dense stand of trees, Interstate 82 ran east to west. Occasionally, she could glimpse the flash of passing headlights through the trees. In just a couple of weeks, the leaves would be all down, and she would be able to see the road more clearly. She liked the interstate. She would watch the passing cars and wonder where they're going. She imagined all the places that the road went, all the cities and towns rising up along it. All she had to do, she realized, was to follow it, and she could go almost anywhere. She really wanted to travel when she got older, and sometimes she felt the call of the road so keenly. It was like being stabbed. The road pulled her blood the way the moon overhead pulled the tide, and when she listened to the windy whoosh of passing traffic, she imagined she could hear the black top itself calling her, inviting her to follow it. Did the road go to California, she wondered. She liked California. On TV it looked so pretty and exotic. Colorado was nice too. They had snow-capped mountains all year round, and wide open spaces where you could lose yourself. A memory came back to her. Julie Andrews in The Sound of Music, twirling in a meadow with her arms thrown out, as if to embrace the world around her. She would do that. She would spin and sing and be happy if only she had a nice field like the one Julie Andrews had, or a beach. She kind of remembered the beach. It was warm and sandy, and the water was so clear she could look down and see fish swimming around. She missed the beach. A gust of wind blew through the open window and she shivered. "What are you doing, Megan?" Lindsay asked tiredly. "Looking out the window," Megan replied. "Could you shut it? It's cold in here." With a little sigh, Megan leaned over and closed the sash. It was best not to start arguments. If you started an argument, you might get hurt, and no one would help you or care. Lindsay was nice enough, but she had anger problems, and when she blew up, Megan couldn't help being scared. A lot of the girls had anger problems here, and you had to be really careful not to make them mad. One time, a girl smacked her across the back of the head for chewing too loud at dinner. And another one filled a cup with toilet water and threw it on her bed because Megan chose something she didn't like on TV. Blowing a dejected puff of air that stirred her bangs, Megan gazed at the grimy pane. She didn't like looking out the window when it was closed, though. At least not as much as she did when it was open. When it was closed, she felt closed. With the air rushing over her and messing her blonde hair, she felt free, a part of the world. But with it closed, the air warm and stale, she felt trapped. Not for the first time, she wondered what her parents were doing and where they were. She hadn't seen them since she was 8. That's when they dropped her off at the orphanage and left her. It was only 6 years ago, but it felt like a lifetime. So long that she had forgotten what they looked like. She could barely even remember being with them. Did her daddy hug her and tell her bedtime stories, like the daddies on TV? Did her mother teach her and guide her, like the mothers you saw in the old sitcoms on Nick at Night? She couldn't remember, and it pained her, but she assumed that they didn't. Mums and dads who did that sort of thing didn't drop you off at orphanages and wave as they pulled away. They didn't leave you alone with girls who picked on you and staff members who treated you like you were a criminal. Loathing filled her, but it was tinged and longing. Thoroughly tired and depressed, Megan hopped down from the window ledge and climbed into her bed. She tried to drift off, but sleep eluded her. She tossed and turned, unable to get comfortable. From her window, she could still see the moon, bright and clean. She wondered if somewhere across the hills and rivers her parents were looking at the same moon, or if the man she would eventually marry was watching it, the man who would one day hold her in his arms and love her and make her happy. Before she drifted off, she said her nightly prayer, "Protect me and watch over me." She thought again of the moon and fell off, as much at peace as she could ever be. A mile away, the devil gazed up at the moon, its face like that of a skeleton rotting in a field. He was on the outskirts of Grafton Falls, drawn forth by the scent of misery on the breeze. The devil was not the author of misery, as some would paint him. He was the asuga of misery. Though preachers stood upon pulpits and blasphemed his name, he wasn't bad. He was a friend to the friendless, the shepherd of the lost, the lover of the loveless. He appeared to the weak, the needy, the forlorn. When he found those poor, pitiful wretches, he gave them what their hearts desired. God, in his heaven, only watched and passed decrees like a distant king. People, every one of them, wants something. Was it really so bad to give it to them? Was it really that evil to load the gun they would use to shoot themselves? Why, he was doing a great service, thank you very much. The least earth could do was show a little gratitude. Like a bloodhound, he followed the acrid odour of pain across a cold knee-high creek and up a steep hill tangled with grass and littered with rocks. A tall, box-like building rose up from the night, its facade faded brick and its roof tabletop flat, a narrow side street lit by the harsh orange light of an arc sodium lamp led him to a wrought iron gate. A sign facing the street read, "St. Anthony's Home for Wayward Children." The devil looked up at the many windows. Some were lit, most were not. Closing his eyes, he basked in the rush of torment, wafting from inside 1,000 different aromas of hurt, longing and need. Everyone the devil knew needed something different, someone different. He waved his hand and the gate, hitherto closed, swung freely open. He slipped in and followed the parking lot to a set of double doors. Inside a lobby stood, revealed in cold white light. A security guard sat at a desk, idly scanning a magazine. The devil left him alone. The guard didn't need him. The children did. He came to her in the night, his face radiant and his waxen hair spilling over his shoulders. His hands, upturned, were rough and strong, each palm bearing a ragged wound. Mary Ann Mitchell turned from him, tears coming to her eyes. Around them, mist wafted lazily. She wasn't sure if they were in her room anymore or not. She didn't think they were. They were somewhere else, somewhere out of space and time, on a spiritual plane. "Look at me," he said, softly, gently. She couldn't bring herself to look into his warm brown eyes. She didn't want him to see the pain, the shame. She had done things in her 17 years that she wasn't proud of. Things that up until now had never bothered her. Things that now bothered her greatly. We all fall short of the glory of God, he said kindly. No one is perfect. Everyone sins. Sin is nature. Sin is okay. He caressed her face and turned her head. She was looking deeply into his eyes, her spirit stirring. The void she had felt her entire life was finally filled. The nuns and priests talked about God's love, but she had never felt it until this very moment. She felt loved, protected, like a child in the arms of its loving father. You are beautiful, he said, and special. She swallowed hard. A lump was stuck in her throat. You are perfect, and I love you. He kissed her then, and she kissed him back, deeply, hungrily. He ran his hands through her hair, down her face, to her throat. His touch was warm, electric. She fell back onto the clouds made of satin and wept with joy when he entered her, filling her with peace and love and happiness. She was home. She was finally home, and she was finally loved. In the next bed over, Christy Harper stood upon a stage, a beautiful purple guitar in her hands. She looked out over a crowd of adoring fans. The hot floodlights felt good on her skin. Goosebumps raced up and down her arms. She had worked so hard to get there. Since she was a little girl, music had been her refuge. When her parents fought and broke things, when they made up and got high on crack together, passing out in the living room and dying to the world, music was there for her. It never hurt her, it never left her, it never ignored her. When she wanted to spend time with Kiss or Aerosmith or AC/DC, her dad's favourite bands, all she had to do was turn them on and drift away in life. She was alone. She had no friends, no family. She was misunderstood and mocked. But Steven Tyler understood her. Listening to Sweet Emotion, she felt as though he had reached into her soul and read her heart. Presently, the dream changed. The concert was over. The people were filing out. She knew they loved her. She knew she was famous. Glancing stage left, she saw Steven Tyler, a smile on his face. It wasn't the old, crusty Steven Tyler of today. It was the young, beautiful Steve Tyler of 1975. She went to him, giddy. "You did great," he said, hugging her. "Really?" she asked, her heart swelling. "Really," he said, releasing her. His smiling face went dark then, and he put his hands on her shoulders. "You're the best." "Am I?" He nodded. "The best that's ever been, baby, and don't you forget it. No one else matters, no one else." Christy thought back to her time in the orphanage. She was a lost little girl then, afraid, alone, a number and nothing else. "You're not a number," Steven said. "You're the only one who matters. It's always been that way. You're special. You're better than everyone else. Looking into his eyes, Christy saw his conviction. He was telling her the truth. She was the only one who mattered in the whole wide world. Everyone else was just fleas. Tiny, insignificant fleas. They don't feel like you do. They don't think like you do. Christy Harper swelled with pride. In the halls, the devil moved like a phantom, his shadow falling jagged and elongated on the wall. In room 2F, he took Mindy Johnson by the hand and looked deeply into her eyes. She smiled, self-conscious of her braces. "Don't," he said, "you're beautiful." "I am?" He nodded and grinned. "The most beautiful woman in the world, and looks are everything." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't speak. People will only love you if you're beautiful. They don't care about your heart or your mind, only your face. She seemed to struggle with that, but finally accepted it. Don't let your beauty slip for 1 second, or you'll lose everything. "Okay," she said. He kissed her, and she kissed him back, accepting him into her heart, as surely as a Christian accepts Christ on her knees. Across the hall, Lauren Connor felt her anxiety lift. For the first time in almost 18 years, her entire life, she felt calm. She wasn't worried about the future anymore. "That's the way you get ahead, dear," her grandmother said. They were in the sun-washed kitchen of her grandparents' cozy little home on Franklin Street, where the honeysuckle grew in the spring and the leaves showered in the fall. Lauren knew how deep down that her grandmother was dead, and had been for nearly 10 years. It was her death that had sent her to the orphanage after all. Her grandfather remarried and didn't want her, and her mother was in prison, so where else would she go? Dead or not, Nana was back, and everything was perfect, just as it had been before she died. You kick, you push, you shove, you claw their eyes out. Lauren was sitting at the table eating ice cream. She felt young and happy and at peace. Her grandmother was standing at the sink, peeling potatoes. The sunlight streaming through the window painted her face warm and golden. The only thing that matters in this life is climbing the ladder. Everyone else is out for themselves. You should be out for you, and you should do whatever it takes to succeed. Lauren was not naturally a cutthroat person, but thinking back to her time in the orphanage, she realised that her grandmother was right. How many times had she laid down for other people? How many times has she let them run over top of her? How much had she suffered and gone without because she was so goddamn nice? "It's okay though," her grandmother said, looking over her shoulder and grinning. "You won't be nice anymore, will you?" "No," Lauren said, and meant it. "That's a good girl." Beyond the mist of sleep, the devil climbed a set of stairs, his long gnarled fingers trailing the handhold, and his nails producing a noise like screaming as it dragged along the metal. Moonlight beamed through a segment window and bathed the cinder block wall in an eerie glow, shadows inching across it, making the strange and expressionist shapes. On the 3rd floor, nuns responded in poised slumber. He passed close, like death in the night, and their sleep was disturbed. One stirred in her bunk, visions of bomb-blasted bodies dancing through her head, and another rubbed her legs crisply together at the fantasy of being taken by a man, any man. The devil paused and slithered between the folds of her brain, touching primal parts and sensitive areas, setting her loins on fire. Wet heat pooled in her centre, and her creamy flesh burned from the head to toe. It's okay, he told her. Masturbation is natural. Breaking your oath to God is fine. He'll understand. She came awake with a start and brushed her fingers through her sweat-matted hair. The dank passion between her thighs bubbled and spat, and with a rush of shame, she touched herself. A wicked smile crossed the devil's lips, and he went on, climbing to the next floor, ghostly footfalls echoing through the stairwell like the coming of doom. He put his lips together and blew a tune of his own devising. In it were screams of agony, shrieking missiles, and the whimpers of children being hurt by their parents. That last one, the sweetest melody of all. On the fourth floor, Father Mackey, the superintendent of St. Anthony's, snorted in his sleep like a man encountering something queer and ugly. He was at his desk, head slumped back and a ribbon of silvery drool coursing down his chin. In the feeble spark of the lamp, his features were craggy and full of shadows. A bottle of whiskey sat before him, the amber liquid inside sparkling under the light. In the chambers of his head, he stood over a lock box that didn't exist. He opened it, and inside was money, thousands of dollars, comprising St. Anthony's budget. In reality, it was kept in a bank account to which only he and the board of trustees had access to. How many times had he considered taking it and leaving? How many nights had he plotted his every step down to his future life in Mexico? The temptation was great, throbbing, incessant, but he stayed his hand. He no longer believed in God, nor did he believe in man, but some small part of him, a flicker in the vast night of his heart, remained. Go on, take it, the man beside him said. He was tall and slender, with an everyman face. He could have been a cop, a construction worker, or even a postman. Mackie looked longingly at the bills, and a lump formed in his throat. He could do it. He could take every cent and be on a beach in Baja before they even knew he was gone. But the children, the state will cover it, the man assured him. The kids will have everything they need, and so will you. Mackie indecisively bit his bottom lip. Could he really do it? He looked at the man for guidance, and the man smiled winningly. That decided him. He picked up a stack of bills and shoved it into his blazer. The man laughed and clapped his back. In the stairwell, the devil threw back his head and basked in the evil he had wrought. For what is evil but pure, unadulterated selfishness? Every act of murder, theft, and genocide ever carried out under the watchful eye of the moon happened because somewhere a heart desired something and took it, no matter the cost. 2,000 years ago, on a dusty hill overlooking a huddled town, Jesus Christ, sacrificed himself on a roughly hewn cross for the sins of the world, or so they say. His death proved the ultimate act of selflessness, and God called upon all his nits to be selfless too. Only man cannot be selfless. He may try, but in the end, what his heart desires will always win. Win out, just as long as you never stop prodding him, for eventually, with enough spit and elbow grease, even the elect will be deceived. Whistling his tune, the devil went on. He had one more stop to make. Megan woke, shivering in the night, her teeth chattering lightly together. She pulled the covers up to her chin, but the chill pervaded her, as though it were coming from within. She turned away from the moonlight streaming through the window. Just then, a bright, warm, golden glow arose in the room. Blinking, she watched as the door opened and a man entered. I'm dreaming, she thought. She sat up slowly, heart racing, and rubbed her eyes like a cartoon character who couldn't believe what she was seeing. Hey honey, the man said, and came forward. Megan blinked again. It was her father. He was tall and broad and dressed in brown pants and a light blue shirt. His hair was wavy black and his eyes were deep blue. His face was soft and warm, frozen. Megan watched as he came to her and sat on her bed. He tried to slip his arm around her, but she shied away. You're not my father. Megan didn't remember what her father looked like exactly, but she knew it was nothing like the image she had built in her mind's eye. The man before her was what she always thought a father should look like. Of course I am, he said smilingly. He lifted up a book. I thought I'd read you a bedtime story. You like those, right? She didn't reply. A sense of wrongness came over her and she gulped. The man's smile widened, and there was something fake in it, cold. She realized that it didn't touch his eyes. His face was warm, but his eyes were cold, dead. He reached out and stroked her face, and Megan winced at the cool, dry kiss of his skin. She pulled away and his face darkened. Baby, he said, as evenly as he could, it's okay. I know you're in pain. I know. Here, he sighed deeply, that things haven't gone the way they should have. I'm sorry for that, baby. I really am. I can't make up for the past and for the things you've gone through here, but I can try to make it right now. You've been alone for a long time, unloved, unwanted, and that tears me up. You're like a flower in need of water, baby. These people here can't provide what you need. I couldn't provide what you needed, but now I'm ready. What do I need? She asked, but already knew affection. She needed affection. She needed someone to hold her and to kiss her forehead. She needed to feel the warmth of someone's closeness, the soft, tender touch of someone's love. She needed someone to dry her tears, to love her, to stay with her. Her perfect father smiled. There was a cold glint in his eye. I love you. I want to take you away from here. We can live in a little cabin in the woods forever and ever. Just you and me. I'll protect you. I'll read to you every night. I'll cuddle you as you fall asleep and never leave you. He moved closer as he spoke. His breath was warm and rancid, turning Megan's stomach. "Don't touch me," she said. "But Princess," he reached for her. "Stop." She screamed, slapping his hand and slipping out of bed. "You're not my father." His face hardened irrationally. She thought she saw literal fire in his eyes. "Megan, I know you're upset, but I'm trying to give you what you need. Stop being such an ungrateful little bitch." His eyes were aflame now. It wasn't a trick of light or an optical illusion. Hot red fire burned inside him. "Get out," Megan said, her heart racing. "Get out of here." "You don't want me?" he asked, coming across the bed on his hands and knees now. His mask fell away then. In its place was a cold reptilian countenance, slits for nostrils, wide bulging eyes, thin lips peeled back over razor fangs. Megan screamed. A lizard-like tongue darted from his mouth, and she recoiled in revulsion. If it touched her, she thought hysterically, she would go mad. "Do you want that?" he hissed. "Go away!" It screamed, and a gust of scalding air pushed Megan back. Though she had been standing against the wall, she fell against the window. The pane shattered, and she was falling through the night, her nightgown fluttering in the wind. She had time to scream, then hit the ground. The maintenance man found her the next morning. She was curled up in a bush. Her right arm was broken, both ankles were sprained, and her face was crisscrossed with scratches. But she was alive. The others were dead. "I don't understand it," the fire marshal said later. "The carbon monoxide detectors are in perfect working order. How that building filled with the stuff without so much as a peep is beyond me. It doesn't make sense." Megan only remembered having a nightmare when she woke. The fire marshal surmised she woke in the night, knew something was wrong, and broke a window to escape. She was lucky, they said, but she didn't feel very lucky. Not when every night she dreamed of a lizard man coming into her room and giving her whatever her heart desired. Fell on his pen, posted by Bloody Spaghetti. I've decided not to write about a soldier gone insane, torturing babies to death because they were the children of his enemies. That's too boring and reflects a perverted understanding of the nature of war. War is violent, but the reality of the matter has also filled it with boredom. Hollywood would never let you know this much. Bloodshed is exciting, while waiting in the encampment isn't. Besides that, I've written enough shock horror over the years. Instead, I've decided to write about myself and my life for a change. Writing seems to be all I know these days. It is all I have known for a very long time. I used to write some pretty good stuff, legends brought to life. Now my brain seems to be dry and swimming in dust rather than creative juices. That's what years of relentless obsession will do to you. Writing is a miracle working. An author breathes life into a fictional reality by birthing it in his mind, and then nurturing and bleeding his life force into his creation. Miracle making is a work of the gods, and to become a god, one must lose their sanity. Left unchecked, the pen becomes the author's worst nightmare. It has the power to drive anyone insane. With heavenly inspiration and divine powers, the ink will corrode your mind and take over your nervous system, forcing you to spill it over and over until you can no longer spill any. In my case, it didn't even end there. The demon sunk its claws so deep into my brain that my entire life has turned into a single writing spree. Divine revelation after divine revelation. Impossible things crept into the depths of my thoughts. Magical places, horrible beings, abstract ideas, and things that I could not even dream to explain. Using words flooded my psyche, slowly growing, patiently taking up more and more of my mental space, until there was no place for anything else. Eventually, the endless stream of impossible things in my mind became a monolith, made up of entirely of words, a gigantic monstrosity that took over my body and forced me to birth it into creation. I was a prisoner inside my body as the titanic abomination took hold and force-fed me my obsession with spilling ink onto the sheets of paper. I have lost control of my motor skills. Unable to move, I couldn't breathe, nor could I flee this terrible disease that had complete control of me. In no time, all I ever did was write. I've lost control of what I was writing. I was writing day and night, unable to stop the process, almost as if a parasite had taken over me. I wouldn't stop, not to eat, not to sleep, not to do anything. There was no end to the hunger of the beast that demanded I write it into existence. The more I wrote, the bigger its shadow grew. I became smaller, thinner, weaker against its influences. The hours turned into days, the days into weeks, and the weeks into months. Still, there was never an end in sight. The shadow kept growing larger and larger, taking over a vaster part of my life, and yet it never seemed to become satisfied. Eventually, the ink ran out, but that was not the end of my possession. My writing up to this point hasn't satisfied the demon just yet. It needed more. A solution came to mind quickly. Rusty, organic ink. That dye was costly, however, and there weren't much of that around. 4 litres. I ran out of that quickly, and when I did, I could finally sleep again. Having been unable to sleep in months because of the endless nightmares the demon had forced me to endure every time I dozed off. When I awoke again, the demon had disappeared, finally. That did not mean that I was free, not at all. I am still not free, not yet. Yet again, a malignant shadow looms over my head, a different shadow. When I awoke, I saw an angel in front of me, its form that of an iridescent form of black flames and lights rotating and twisting inside a blinding smoke screen made up of the screaming victims of perdition, its wings mortal sins. The angel was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, a mortifying beauty, the likes of which no living man had ever seen and lived to tell the tale. It mesmerized me, filling me with joy, the likes of which are unknown to man. The angel's purpose was to take me to the next destination. However, it never did. My writing and obsessive dedication had a less than the desired effect on the angel. It refused to take me away. It turned out that even cosmic forces cannot deal with the disease that had made me waste myself into an anthropomorphic pile of dust. The angel condemned me to stay where I am. I am free to do as I please, as long as I write something every once in a while. That's where the problem lies, however. I was perhaps unintentionally cursed with a fate worse than death. I cannot stand daylight anymore, nor can I walk among my fellow humans, because what has become of me is nothing but a pale sack of skin and bones. The sun burns my delicate skin. Unbearable pains riddle every inch of my body. Sickening sounds and contortions of my form accompany every movement of mine. All of that would expose anyone in my presence to untold amounts of horror. If there was anyone around me, I spend my days staring at the abyss, hoping it would stare back at me, begging to be swallowed by the creatures that roam within my nightmares, which now accompany me throughout the hours of the day. For I no longer sleep. Having so much time on my hands has done me no favours, as I have gotten irritated with the sound of my own heartbeat. Thus, I tore out the organ responsible for my annoyance. I still remember the sound it made when I chucked it angrily at the wall. It wouldn't stop beating. I can only find solace now in writing. The demon is no longer here. I am no longer suffering at the hands of my terminal disease, but spilling the rusty organic ink has become a force of habit. I often wonder what will happen first. Will the angel of the pit get sick of me and finally throw me into the depths of its kingdom, or will my body disintegrate into actual dust?